Okay.
Well, hello, Jeroen.
Hello, back. You're welcome. I'm still here.
So we were at the nux of what I consider one of the most phenomenally interesting points, and that is how you arrived at discerning when you were authentic and when you were not. So if you could maybe pick that up and
yes,
talk about that.
Yeah, so I spoke about coincidences or synchronicities. Well, I'm stumbling from one synchronicity into the other synchronicity. And maybe I can't remember, maybe 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago already, I was asked to give a lecture, a workshop at an art school in Estonia. And it was a 5-day workshop. And in that workshop, I would talk about the role of consciousness in creativity. And I would teach some methods to be more creative, or at least to become more authentic, because my theory is like the more authentic you are, the more creative you potentially can be. And I will talk about that a bit later. But the important thing was that I was preparing for the workshop and had a lot of material, but something was nagging, something was missing. And I was reading something I can't remember, or I was listening to a YouTube video. I just can't remember. But in any case, somebody said or wrote about how an author once said in an interview in 1969 in a French magazine that everybody has a secret life, a private life, and a public life. And it was like, yes, I immediately knew that this is important. So the context wasn't about authenticity. The context wasn't about creativity or consciousness at all. It was something else. But I knew that, because I could see it, that's the thing, that I can see these things just like floating here almost. Like, if I can bring these 3 things together, like if they become one, so the secret life, the private life, and the public life, if they can become one, the more they become one, the more authentic I will be. And that made perfect sense to me. The less secrets I have, the more open I can be, the more I can express myself, the more risks I can take, because I don't have this inner voice also I'm telling me like, no, you can't do that. No, you can't say that. So you don't have this constant, all these boundaries. I remove the boundaries the moment I can say like, no, actually, I'm going to do that. Yes, I know it's against the, the consensus. It's against the culture. It's against all those kind of things. It will upset people perhaps, but I want to do this. Maybe I make a mistake, but it's my mistake. So, and a lot of things came together, and I used that, and I began to build my own model based on those 3, notions of life: secret, private, public. And so that became the cornerstone of thinking about authenticity. And then parallel to that was this whole research I did in consciousness. Consciousness, next to that was the paranormal, all sorts of unexplained things that people couldn't explain but anyway happened, or people thought happened. Let's say UFOs or aliens or ghosts or weird effects in life or dreams. I was fascinated by dreams. So it's very easy to struggle with these things and to laugh like, ha, 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 it's all nonsense. Okay, well, that's what you can think. I don't care. I'm interested. And every time I went somewhere in terms of like research, doors began to open. I got in touch with people who again could tell me something, and I learned more and more and more, and things became not like more disconnected, but more connected. So authenticity, consciousness, they became the most important things in my quest to understand, like, why am I so creative, or why do I make up all these things, and why do I see things other people don't see, or most people don't see. So then in that workshop, I was testing a couple of methods, a couple of tools. And one of them was remote viewing, which I had just finished the course, just the workshop, a couple of maybe weeks before I went to do the workshop in Estonia. I went to a remote viewing workshop. I didn't want to go to the remote viewing workshop at all, but a friend paid the workshop for me, and thank you again. And I learned there that actually I'm not crazy. I, like a lot of people, some things, ideas come to mind, and I can steer it. I can have more control over what might happen in the future, or what might have happened in the past. And so that's what I learned during the workshop. And I had some good experiences there, and it was kind of successful. And I didn't do remote viewing anymore after that, because I knew enough. I learned enough from that. Anyway, I was teaching that to my students. I made my own methods. They had success. And basically, it became a huge soup of interesting things, and my world opened, and I started to see the connections: consciousness, who we are, authenticity, creativity, where do ideas come from, and from that, how to live a life which is much more what you want to live. So we spoke about that quite a bit lately. And yeah, I don't know, I mean, I can just ramble on for a while, but just ask me a simple question and I can continue again.
Well, you use very specific techniques with your students. Could you describe one of the techniques of how to do that?
Yes. So at the core of about a lot of mystical experiences, or getting great ideas, whether you are a scientist or a musician or a visual artist, or anybody who wants to solve things or needs to solve things, there are a couple of things which always come back. And those things are, you have a goal in life. Let's say there are these classic examples of famous scientists like Heisenberg or Bohr, of course Einstein, and they had problems to solve, and they were trying to solve them by rational thinking. And of course you can solve a lot by rational thinking, but some crucial things they didn't solve by thinking and calculating. They actually were solving them by not thinking about them. Quite the opposite, by turning off the rational mind. So part of the brain is always like arguing and calculating and whatever. So yeah, the same thing you have with artists when they are in a kind of meditative state, or when they're dreaming off a little bit, or when they wake up in the middle of the night, or they listen to beautiful music, or when you're in the shower, you're running. When you're running, you can be in the flow. So you have forgotten, for example, that you have been running kilometers because you just didn't think about the pain in your legs. Or the same in the car. If you're driving long distances, you might at some point realize, like, hold on a second, I have been driving 20 miles, but I don't even remember that I've been passing all those signs and crossings, but still. So those are the kind of moments when the analytical mind, the thinking mind, is sort of like on the back burner. And those are the moments when other things, other signals can come to mind. So remote viewing, controlled remote viewing, is partially based on that principle. It's a kind of structured way to get into that flow. Meditation, similar thing. Yoga, similar thing. There's a very good book I would like to recommend people. It's a book written by Grant Cameron, and it's called Inspired. And I mean, he has a lot of examples, I know, about artists and scientists. So basically, by his book, I learned a lot from him. But his conclusion is, like what I saw recently, is the saying: a lot of experiences happen when we turn off the rational mind, and the or the part of the brain starts to be able to receive very subtle images, or images, I mean data, information. Could be images, could be sounds, could be something, could be smell. So in the remote viewing workshop, I learned to control that. There was a process, and you follow the process. And what I did for my students in Estonia at first, and later in other places, was I brought them in a meditative state very quickly by using binaural beats. So you have a headset on, and you can look up binaural beats, and maybe you can put a note here, well, like the text, and you can go to Wikipedia. Even there's the good text, a good description of what it is. So they start to doze off, and some fell asleep. But most of them, not all perhaps, but most of them start to get data or information which they normally would not get. And there was one, actually I can give two examples. One student remarked, and they had to write down things afterwards, so I had it on paper, or they had it on paper. She remarked that she started to smell the ink of her ballpoint. She said it was so intense. I never realized that actually it had a smell. So her smell became much more prevalent than the sight or the hearing. Another student said, like, I could hear the voices in rooms just a couple of rooms down the hall. And later she checked, and there were people talking. And in the other rooms, there was nobody. There was nobody next door, at least according to her. So I had quite many of these things. There was one student who always forgets things. Let's see what I can say. Anyway, she was pregnant at the time, and she had to go to a checkup the next morning. And she always forgot something. So. And there was a kind of thing in her life. And after 2 days of these experiments with the binaural beats and the remote viewing in my way, she had a dream the night before she had to go to the checkup. And I don't know the exact number of steps she had to go through, but anyhow, in my memory, it was like this, that in her dream, she went to the checkup, she went to the doctor, but she had to go back 9 times because she forgot this, she forgot that, she forgot this, she forgot that. So the next morning was the first time, at least that's what I remember that she said, that was the first time that she had not forgotten anything. Because in her dream, she had prepared everything. So the next morning she took everything, she filled all the forms, whatever she had to take with her, she took with her. And she like, it never happened in her life. It was always like that. Another student, and that was the most dramatic one in that workshop, there were other ones, because they had been doing this binaural beat things for about 3 days, I think. 2 days was like theory, 3 days was practice. She had to leave on Friday to visit her home country. She would have to take the bus. And late in the afternoon, the bus would leave at 5, something like that. And the hours before, she would the whole time have this feeling like, I shouldn't take the bus, I shouldn't take the bus, shouldn't take the bus. So these are the effects that you might get, these kind of messages that you get, and you start to notice them. Well, she didn't take the bus. She took a bus later. Thank goodness, because the bus she would have taken got a pretty bad accident. 20 people sort of wounded, one died or whatever was the thing. It was really horrible. So she sent me later the message like, about this. So it was not only me who experienced those things. It were not only the people I had spoken to in the past who had those things, but even students who were kind of skeptical. Most of them were kind of skeptical, like, this doesn't work for me. They start to have similar experiences. And for some people, this changed their life. One student changed the whole study because he realized, like, I don't want to study this anymore. I want to do something else. So every time in all those workshops, there were some kind of dramatic changes. There were some less kind of dramatic changes. So this is one of the methods that I start to teach, to turn off the analytical mind, and then either in a very directed way. So you set yourself a kind of target or a question or an intention, and then you turn off your mind and then see what comes in. So that's one approach. The other one is a much more free approach. You just see what happens when you turn off your mind. So you become more in a meditative state. So I have a lot of variations, but the clue is stop thinking. And whenever you get something, don't think like, oh, it must be this, or it must be that. Just don't judge it, don't analyze, just let it be, just write it down. So I give you one method that makes it perhaps a bit more clear. What I do, well, in half of the cases, I try to sort of document what I'm doing. So in half of the cases, I give the students the assignment, always to have the headset with them, and I give them then the beats, and then to take an A4 paper, fold it in half. On the left side of the paper, they have to write down all the things that come out of the blue that don't make any kind of sense. The right side is always the things that they think is some kind of analytical thinking. Okay, this picture, A4, or in your case, letter paper, folded in half, two sides. Left side, all the things that don't make any kind of sense, or the side to write down all the things that you think are the answers. The question is often, we're going to see a photograph in 10 minutes, and there's a whole procedure that I cannot know what is the photograph, they cannot know what's the photograph, all through randomized things and blah, 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 that doesn't all matter. But they don't know what they're going to see in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, they put on the binaural beats. They have to write down all the things that come to mind, like, salt. I don't know where that comes from. That goes to the left. Okay, it's going to be a photo. It's about the pyramids. It must be the pyramids. That goes to the right, because that's the analytical mind, thinking, arguing, like it must be this. Or the Eiffel Tower, yeah, because it's an important building, whatever. That goes to the right side of the paper. So I teach them how to separate those things. And then in the end, after 10 minutes, I say like, okay, it's time, put down your pen. And we're now going to look at the photograph. And the photograph is, for all of us, a big surprise, because we don't know what it's going to be. So the couple of steps we take, we get to the end result, the photograph, and then I collect the data from all the students. And what I have realized now is that I don't have enough samples yet. Maybe I have done it now 6, 7, 8 times or something, maybe all in all 120, 150 students. But roughly 5 to 10% of the people, now 5% probably has it just spot on. They can just describe the photograph in terms of, let's say, there's a pond with ducks. They will describe water area, animals in it, trees around it, or something like that. On that level, they can describe it. So not the color of the feather or the color of the whatever, but like roughly they can build, the outlines and the contents of the photograph. It's about 5%. Roughly 15 to 20% is completely wrong. It's nothing. It could be anything, but they are mostly on the right side of the paper. And what's on the left side is also often very argued or logically derived contents. So they are not able to turn off the analytical mind. Then there is a group of maybe, let's say 20%, 30% or something like that, that if you make clusters of 2 or 3 people, they describe the picture pretty well. And then it happens often that some is very good in smell, some very good in sound, some very good in the visuals. So our five senses, you can also pick up that. Some people are very good in picking up sounds. Yeah, I hear some animal sounds. I hear some quack, 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 or whatever is the sound the ducks make. Or I smell, grass, or so. That's often what I also see. So I have a couple of these kind of clusters, and then we start to, because it's often in the context of creativity and generating ideas, I do exercises with some more specific geared towards getting good ideas. And because that's what I'm hired to do. I'm hired to come in somewhere and to help people to get better ideas. And then my question is often, how do you define a good idea? Well, my core definition is like a good idea is something that makes people enthusiastic in the future. And the more people are enthusiastic about it, the better is the idea. Not so much the execution, but at least the idea. A good idea is not so much what I like at this point in time. That's just an idea that I like in this point in time. But when we talk about a good idea, there's an aspect of future there. Okay. And for that, we can use tools like remote viewing or whatever we want to call it. So then in the workshops, we often have very directed exercises to see like, how could you actually get those good ideas? And then we come to the point, and I'm not going to do it like here now, but we look at physics. And what do physicists or some physicists tell us about time? Is it this kind of linear thing of cause and effect? Or is time much more like something that we can't define, but the best problem, the best thing that we could maybe come up with is a kind of everything is together, past, present, future. And sort of like we can tap into that. The past is much more defined. The future is much more about probabilities. It's much more open. It's much more vague in a certain way. But it's not defined. So I don't think the future is set in stone at all. We have a way to influence that and to find our way there. So we talk about that. We talk a lot about like, what do different people say and how could you actually test these things? Because I come back to the earlier point. Yeah, this is a very nice story, but can you test it? And yes, we can test it. Are you always successful? No, we're not. There are many times that you're not successful. That's only interesting, because if you're not successful, why could it be? Why could it be that one day you are successful and the other day you're not? Is it because you ate the wrong food? Is it because you were tired? Is it because you were preoccupied? Is it because you had your mindset on a particular answer? Or what is it? What makes you not successful when before you were successful? So I don't see in this whole field, I don't see much failure. I only see interesting moments. And that makes my life much, much easier, because if I fail, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It didn't work. Damn, I would like to test it more. So, and I think that's what I had to learn, because it's sort of in me to be a perfectionist and to deliver when something is really perfect. And you had to give that part up and learn to be imperfect. And to come back to this whole thing about like private life and secret life and public life. Yeah, I have to take risks, and I have to do things that don't make sense, not even to me. So this is roughly like what I, yeah.
And isn't that also, I mean, you're willing to acknowledge that life is about making mistakes. I mean,
absolutely.
That's where the learning comes. So
absolutely.
To be imperfect, to not judge what is happening, but to look at it with interest and to say, oh, there's something there. Now, why did I succeed yesterday and why am I not today? And always with that element of curiosity, because isn't curiosity, it's an element of creativity and consciousness.
Absolutely.
And so, I mean, you're the embodiment of curiosity. From the time you were a single digit kid, you were asking the questions why, and tearing things apart and wanting to look deeply. I mean, a great metaphor, I mean, not just deeply into the toaster, but into your own self.
Yes, and I do assume, I mean, I've been thinking because of this interview, we spoke a couple of times about like doing the interview or not. And I'm not really like a person who wants to be interviewed and talk, I just like, I just rather build tools and I'd rather one-on-one help people or figure out stuff. So this is not really common stuff for me to do. But I was thinking like, what can I actually tell? What can I talk about? And I had this philosophy about like, why do we come to this life or into this world or into this life? And and then I realized like, I can start at so many points. There are so many starting points that I could imagine, and they're all fascinating. I could start from well, it's just a coincidence that we come into this life. We are unprepared and we are like, a biological robot or something, and then everybody's steering us and whatever. Or we are here and it's kind of some kind of road laid out for us that we had to follow. We have no choices anymore, or something like that. Or we start with only fear and we have to grow towards love and light. Or there are so many options here, and I find them all interesting. And I noticed that for people it's really difficult to accept that I don't have one point of view, because tomorrow I can think something else. Not that I will say like, oh, what I thought yesterday is wrong, but what I have discovered now is very interesting. How does this work? So how can I put this in English? I don't have one theory. I don't believe in anything and I believe everything. It's fantastic to believe everything and nothing. And when people come with some kind of like, oh, it's because of, this method, Reiki is the thing. Without Reiki, we can't survive. Or vitamin D. Without vitamin D, it's, whatever. Or this is the danger and this is the solution. It's not in my, it's just not in my thinking. My thinking doesn't work like that. I don't believe in gods, but also don't believe in not gods. So when people come with a kind of theory that I'm not familiar with, or which sounds very complex and I can't make head or tails, I often think like, okay, but what if there's on the backside of the moon, there's a pink bunny sitting, which controls everything on life. That's the one which actually does everything, which actually controls how we are and how we feel and what we're thinking. Of course, it doesn't make any kind of sense, but that's my whole point. It doesn't have to make sense, but it is my way to sort of release the tension of like, I don't need to know. It could be anything. It doesn't really matter. Only thing that matters to me is if I have a theory or a philosophy, can I apply it? Can I repeat it? Does it work? Could I tell other people or teach other people how to do it? Does it work for them? If it works, fine. If it fails, fine. What can I learn from all these things? And in this way, I just build and build and build and build. So this has been throughout my life, actually, my way of thinking. But I never dared to do this. Only since maybe 2010, 12, whatever. I said like, whatever. This is my life. I'm going to do this. I'm tired of the ups and downs. I'm tired of starting over again. I'm tired of repressing my own thinking. And I'm just tired. I want to do something better. So that's where I am. What can I say?
Well, most fascinating. But what's so capturing to me is as creative as you are, and curious and embracing of the full extreme of, for example, no God and yes God, but you're scientific about it, and yet you're not analytical about it in the sense that you do not allow the left brain to run your experiments. You don't allow the left brain to dominate. And
no.
in fact, you cancel that out during the process of arriving at possibilities. And so that the analytical brain isn't functioning or overriding the creative side of the brain.
Sure.
And yet, going through that process, you then prove your theories, and that's that's so darn scientific. I mean, we're missing that scientific model today, because today we have all this false science that is held up to us as if it is science, and yet there's no proving. It's just statements that are empty. So that's amazing. One thing that you haven't really talked about, and I'll put a link to this below, but you haven't talked about your artwork, your own art as an exploration. And I mean, your artwork is, you know, I mean, it's quite, it's accomplished. It's accomplished. And so I'd like to put a link below, but could you just speak the link to your art?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had to figure out, like, so what do I want? Because there were so many things I liked, so many theories I liked, but also many things I like to do. So whether it is, you know, doing things with ceramics or with paint or building a greenhouse or digging something in the garden, I like to do a lot of things. Okay, so it became very scattered for me, and I had, once again, I had the feeling I had no control over it. So then my analytical mind kicked in and said, like, okay, I need to have structure. So I began to figure out, you know, what are the big things I actually like. Okay, I like to talk. I like to talk to people, and I like to instruct them or help them. And especially I like to ask questions. Now I'm talking. But as you might know, I ask a lot of questions. Mostly I'm just asking. And so I like that part. I like the interaction between people. And I sincerely like to help people. That's why I like teaching. I'm like, okay, teaching I like. Teaching is like I've been doing for 30 years. I like teaching. But then I'm like, yeah, but I never like to be only a teacher. I always was a kind of a guest lecturer or whatever you want to call it. I never full-time teacher. I just can't do that either. Like, yeah, but why? But what is missing then when I'm teaching? Well, I also want to do research. Yeah, true. I want to do research. So I had teaching, research, but research in what? I don't care about automobiles or airplanes. So like, but I only care about consciousness, because that's for me the start of everything. So okay, teaching, consciousness. Okay, actually, those two things they work together quite fine. I can, you know, benefit from both. I can teach about consciousness, and in my teaching, I can do experiments on my students or with my students, and feedback to my consciousness research. Okay. That's not enough either, because I want to build, I want to make, I want to create. Okay, so I like to paint and I like to draw. So I have those three main areas in my life, and that is very crucial. So my paintings more and more are about consciousness and about how can I visualize the impossible? How can I visualize that time might be not a continuation? It might not be like a cause and effect. How do you visualize that? You know, you basically can't. So I'm setting myself up for failure, which I like, because there's no more freedom than failure. You know you're going to fail. So I can do anything I want because I know I'm going to fail. So I can maybe get close to something, but anyhow. So and so these paintings or these drawings or this what I call rather visual expressions, they change in appearance quite a bit, but more and more they are about like asking the questions. So what is life about? My last series are more about using the one of the dogmas in the Catholic religion, or how do you say that in beautiful words? I don't know. But you have the 7 sins and the 7 vices, or the 7 virtues. So I use that as a basic theme to symbolize how we as humans are, you know, navigating or struggling or maneuvering or whatever in between those 7 and 7 positive and negatives, like in complex magnetic fields. So you have greed, you have lust, you have all those kind of so-called negative things, and then you have the opposites. And then we make choices in life. So I start to think, like, how can I visualize that? So I'm now at the stage that I use kind of the symbology and the visual language from the Renaissance, and sort of use a mystical language, visual language, and try to paint, you know, those kind of basic things. Before I did a bit more abstract things because I was testing like those abstraction help me. I probably end up with doing a lot of different things and mixing them And but basically, that's for me, that the painting, the visual part, is for me the way to express my thinking. And so it will evolve. What I did yesterday, probably I will disagree with tomorrow, and that's fine. It's just like, and I just don't care. But it's for me a tool. It's for me definitely a tool. So those three things, the teaching, the research, and the visual side of me, they come together, and they allow me to sort of satisfy all my sides. And then within, especially within the, no, actually in all of them, I almost always try to find the boundary where my public life goes into my private life and my private life into my secret life, because it becomes quite obvious that you have a thought in mind that you want to paint. But like, oh, no, I can't paint that. That's a wonderful moment. Because there I notice that, okay, hold on a second, something is holding me back to paint that particular thing. Why is it? Is it purely me? Or is it some kind of code or programming that comes from the outside world that they had, in my youth, or religion, or newspaper, or whatever, or advertising, whatever is the thing, something from outside that influences me. So also in my teaching, what words do I use? And what obstacles do I notice when I'm talking to somebody? For example, and also here, I have to consider that some words I probably can't use. Like, okay, I can't use that. Yeah, it might upset people again, or something like that. So those moments I find very interesting, and I see it in research. So what topics do I want to research? I see it in my visual expression. I see it in my teaching. And these are my internal processes to notice, like, okay, so am I growing here? Can I today paint what I couldn't paint yesterday? Can I today teach what I couldn't teach last year? And so I keep track of these things. Sometimes I even write them down. I do some experiments which I write down very precisely.
I'm going to interrupt you for a moment.
Yeah.
We're at the end of this section, so I want to thank you for this, and we'll see you in the next interview.
Okay, good. See you later.
Hang on. So let's see, how do I, hang on.
Do you send the link? Or do you want to do it next week or what?